Hmm.
So I think we are live. Hello, hello, hello. Hello to everyone and welcome to yet another session of Storynama. So today's session is very special because I have a very special person with me today who has $1 million smile. As you can see that she's very excited and very happy about today's session. Even though we generally have very busy Sundays, still she is filling me with so much energy. And so, ma'am, first of all, I would like to welcome you on our YouTube channel after a long time. So thank you for taking out time to tell amazing stories that you're going to tell today. So uh,
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
मैम मतलब you have done so well in your career, and I mean so have you did you ever think one day you would be on the YouTube channel of the 8
No, it's another achievement for me, absolutely. And I'm not saying this as a joke. I am seriously saying that it is actually another achievement for me. And like I can share my own experience. The last time I was here doing Storynama with my stories, I was nervous, and I wanted to share those stories, but I was definitely nervous. But today I just feel so happy that I'm here, and I'm just enjoying myself already. I can't even express. I don't know if it shows on my face, but I am absolutely unable to express how happy and excited I am for today's story. So
Okay.
it's definitely in that sense also it's quite an achievement to be a part of Storynama.
Okay, amazing, ma'am. And it's really great to see. I mean, how long we have come. We have covered so many
Right,
stories till now. And last time we spoke about Queens of India.
right,
So
right.
this time, ma'am, what is it going to be about?
So it is going to be about women again because that is
More
something that
queens.
sorry,
Some more queens.
some we can definitely call them queens. I'm very glad that you actually brought that word up. We can definitely call them queens. So today the stories that I have are stories that have been published stories by women writers of India. And as we know, even until now, we do not have as many women writers as we do, male writers.
Hmm.
So women in general, perspectives of women, stories that women want to tell, they're in general very close to my heart. I feel a sense of affinity towards them because I have similar experiences and I can relate with them. So
Hmm.
that is one of the reasons that I have brought some more stories by women. They're not their stories per se,
Hmm.
but these are written by women, which is
Okay.
like a step further. Now, last time I was telling stories of some women, now I'm going to reiterate stories that these women have told themselves already. So,
Okay.
so I think that is really great. We should, more women should have a voice, more women should come out and tell their stories. I'm
Okay.
very excited about
Okay. So, ma'am, who are these lucky women who got
that.
chance
I
to
think I am lucky. I am lucky that I'm getting to tell these stories, to tell their story. So the first writer that I have is Mahadevi Verma. She was a 20th century poet, and she was a poet. She was a novelist. She also taught at a college, and she was a short story writer, very prolific. And one thing that I wanted to mention about her was that this one time, Suryakant Tripathi Nirala, I'm sure you must have heard his name. Again, another very prolific poet. He said that she is Saraswati in the vast temple of Hindi literature. So that was the stature that she had. So and the story of Mahadevi Verma that I have today. I could have chosen any other story. I could have
Mhm.
experimented today, but I wanted to. I really wanted to tell this. I really wanted to narrate Gillu one more time because it's very close to my heart. I encountered it back when I was a kid in school, and I think most of us have read Gillu in school. So that way, I'm sure a lot of people will be able to relate with it.
Mhm.
And one very important thing is I've never had pets at home. So I generally don't really feel that way about animals. But when I read this, even as a child, it stayed with me for a long time and it touched me very deeply.
Okay.
So which is why I chose to narrate Gillu today.
Okay.
And yes, that's pretty much about this story. And
Okay.
the other writer that I have is Sudha Murthy, who was actually she came to writing stories later. She's a master's in computer science. She has an MTech in computer science. She's been a teacher of computer science for a long time. She's also, of course, the co-founder of Infosys, and she's a social worker and whatnot. But
Mhm.
again, even with her, what I really really love about her is how simple she is, and uh, even her writing is very simple. Her stories are so simple yet so deep, and they touch you so deeply.
Mhm.
So, which is why I've chosen one of her stories. The story
Okay.
that I have by Sudha Murthy is called "How I Taught My Grandmother to Read," and this is from a collection of stories that with the same name. And this is excerpts from her life itself. So yes, so these are the two writers that we have today, and very excited.
Okay. Awesome, amazing, amazing. Thank you so much for bringing these writers to us and to our students today, ma'am. So I would like everybody to, give wish all the best to Deeksha, ma'am, because she is about to share some amazing stories with you, and I'm sure that everybody is gonna love it. So without further ado, ma'am, shall we get started?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
So
So I
yes,
will
please.
just put you on full screen so that you know
Yes, sir.
all the children can see your only your beautiful face, not mine. Okay, okay, fine. Let's go ahead.
Okay. So, first of all, before I begin, I think it's important to mention that for these stories, I'll put on the persona of the writer. So I'll be narrating as the writer and not as Deeksha today. So the first story, which is Gillu, it begins when I was lying on my bed in my room, and I was having a good time. The wind was blowing outside. It was a nice breezy day, and I happened to notice the golden jasmine that had a yellow bud today. When I looked at the yellow bud, I got reminded of this small creature hiding in the greenery of the creeper, how it used to. Now, every time when I look at that creeper, I'm reminded of how it would jump on my shoulder and it would crawl on both my shoulders and try to play with me. And I think of how now it has become one with the mud, and because it is no more. But every time I look at the creeper, I am reminded of that creature, and it brings back so many memories to me. So today, when I was looking at the creeper, I also saw this group of crows who were playing, around a pot, and I looked at them and I began to think how bizarre a bird the crow is. Highly respected, yet highly contemptuous. And I was lost in my thoughts about the crow, how our ancestors visit us in the form of a crow. No other bird but the crow. The things that they have to remind us of, they remind us in that hoarse voice of the crow. So while I was in my thoughts thinking about the crow, thinking about the crow, which I call the Kak Puran, suddenly my thoughts, my stream of thoughts was broken. And I saw this very tiny creature at the foot of a pot. And when I looked at it closely, I realized that it was a small squirrel, a very, very small squirrel that had fallen from its nest. I tried to look at it closely and I realized that the crows were trying to eat the squirrel. Two, uh, uh, two wounds by the beak of the crow, only two wounds, had injured this tiny squirrel uh, so greatly that when I got it to my room, when I showed it to my family, when my family looked at that injured squirrel, it said, all my family members said, you cannot heal this squirrel. Nothing can happen to this squirrel anymore. This squirrel will not survive. But, but my heart did not agree. So I brought it to my room. I gave it first aid. I wiped it with antiseptic, and I tried to feed it some milk with some cotton. I soaked some cotton in some milk and I tried to feed the squirrel, but its mouth wouldn't open and the milk kept dripping from both ends of the mouth. I couldn't take that sight, so I kept nursing it. I kept it with me as long as I could. And in 3 days after my treatment, it could drink water now. And it was way better. Its health had improved. It was way better than before. And now it could hold my finger with its little toes. Two little toes, it held my finger. And that was the most beautiful feeling in the entire world. Now, in 2, 3 months, it had come back to health and it was so proactive. It was such a lovely creature that my entire family had fallen in love with it. And I have been very fond of, I have a lot of pets. I have been very fond of animals all my life. But this creature was very special. So, from calling it an injured squirrel that I was nursing, we started calling it Killu. Now, my lovely Gillu, and I was in love with it. I was I was completely mesmerized with the presence of Gillu in my life. And since Gillu had fallen down from the nest and it had come to my window, on the same window, on one of the bars, I tied a little basket with a thread for Gillu as his home, as his new home, and I spread a sheet of cotton inside. And you wouldn't believe, Gillu loved his new home. It was his home for the next 2 years, and he absolutely loved his new home. And he shook himself and he swinged himself in his new house, and he would jump out of it. He would take an entire round of the room. He would play on the lattice of the window, and he would go back to his home and rest there. And he completely loved this new setup that he had found himself in. And everybody, now when they looked at Gillu, because it had come to us in a very injured state, in a state that everybody thought was irreparable, now when everybody looked at Gillu, they were so impressed and surprised with its understanding and its functioning. Gillu was really proactive and intelligent, which is why it was also my favorite. And every time I sat down to write, now I had a lot of work. I had a lot of writing work. I had a lot of work from college. So I would be busy. I would keep busy in my room at my desk. So every time I sat down to write, it would come to my feet and it would climb up and descend with the same speed. Right at my feet, it would again climb up and descend with the same speed. And it would keep happening until he compelled me to get up and play with him. And I would embrace Gillu, I would play with it. And again, it was one of the most beautiful feelings in the world. And I really loved doing that. So even when I was being disturbed at work, I didn't really mind because Gillu was actually, a piece of my heart. And one very amazing thing about Gillu was that every time he was hungry, he got very cranky, like a little kid. He got very cranky, and somehow we had this connection where I could always where I could always tell that he was cranky and he was hungry. And I always knew every time he was hungry, I knew that he was hungry. So he wouldn't have to really express it, and he would keep nagging for cashew nuts and for biscuits. And you give him a handful of cashew nuts, and he would be the happiest squirrel in the entire universe. That's how much he loved cashew nuts. Now the spring came, and this was the first spring ever of Gillu's life. And the smell of neem and jasmine, it filled my room, and it also made Gillu really happy. I could see that with the with how he had begun to interact with the environment. I could absolutely see that the spring was his favorite. And in the spring, another wonderful thing that happened was that outside this same window where I had kept this house for Gillu, I had kept this basket for Gillu, other squirrels from outside, they would collect there and they would try playing with Gillu. And this was the first time that he was interacting with the outside world after I had after he had begun to live with me. And he loved that. He absolutely loved that. So instead of keeping him in the house all the time, in his little basket all the time, I set it free to play with these squirrels. And uh, you wouldn't imagine what happened. This very proactive but very shy of the outside world, Gillu became the leader of this army of squirrels. And every time I would come to my room late in the evening, I could see him commanding this group of squirrels, and it was such a lovely sight to witness. And it absolutely loved playing with these squirrels. And I had other dogs and cats at home, so which I couldn't let harm Gillu in any way, and I had to keep Gillu away from these dogs and cats. And there were a lot of important papers in my room, a lot of important books in my room, which I had to keep away from the dogs and from the cats, and also the people in my family. They were very important papers that I needed to keep away. So I would always keep my door closed whenever I wasn't in the house. Now, every time I entered the room in the evening, Gillu would run up to me from head to toe, and it would embrace me. And that is when every time that happened, I knew how much I could see how fond he was of me, how much he loved me, and I loved him as much, of course. Now, he had become, like I said, he had become the leader of the squirrels in my absence. But at exactly 4 o'clock every day, he would go back to his basket. And all my animals, they've always been very fond of me. I am very fond of them, but none of them have ever dared to eat with me on my plate. None of my animals, but Gillu was an exception. He'd sit by my plate. I had taught him how to sit by the plate that I was eating in, that I would eat in at the dining table, and he would eat rice with me, and he would finish even the last morsel of rice. That's how lovely a creature he was. But like I mentioned in the beginning, he was very, very fond of cashew nuts. To pick a handful of cashew nuts, put it in his basket, and by evening they would all be gone. I had seen that myself so many times that no matter the number or the amount of cashew nuts you kept in his basket, they would all be gone by evening. Now, a very unfortunate incident happened. I met with an accident and I injured myself, and I had to stay in the hospital for a couple of days, so I was away from Gillu. I was told later by my family, every time the door of my room was opened, Gillu would rush to the door, and when he did not find me at the door, with the same speed, he would rush back to his house, that little basket, and maybe he was brooding because I wasn't there. And when I came back, he was present with me throughout my sickness. So one more thing that happened when I came back, while he was with me throughout my sickness, he would be at my bedside every time I was sleeping, as if now it was his turn to nurse me. One more thing that I noticed that made me realize how much he loved me was that when I was away, my family, because all the members of my family, they were so fond of Gillu anyway, they would feed him. They would keep a handful of cashew nuts in the basket in his home. When I came back, when I was cleaning the basket, all those cashew nuts were still there. He hadn't eaten his favorite food in my absence. That's the bond that me and Gillu share. But well, despite all of this, the lifespan of squirrels is only 2 years. So it was the end. We were coming to the end of Gillu's life journey, and at night, one of the final days of his night. This was actually the final day of his life. He came to my bed. I thought it was a usual, nighttime encounter with him, rendezvous, as I would like to call it. Um, so he came to my bed and he clasped my hand with his finger. Very strangely, his claws were getting cold. I got a little worried. I was a little startled when that happened. So I tried to rub his claws. I turned on the heater because I did not want him to be cold all night long. But nothing worked. And by morning, he had fallen asleep to wake up in another life. I have goosebumps when I say this, but Gilu was gone, and I'll quickly move to the end of the story because I do not want to begin crying now. But Gillu now sleeps under the same creeper that I mentioned in the beginning, and it gives me immense satisfaction that he's still around. Now, coming back to Deeksha, the next story that we have is Sudha Murthy's How I Taught My Grandmother to Read. Now, this story is from her life itself. This collection has stories from she has converted incidents from her life, from her
Ma'am,
childhood, from her
uh,
adulthood.
ma'am,
Yes, sir.
sorry to interrupt, but
Yes, sir.
can we just take 30 seconds pause because I'm very very sad right now because I got so
Sure,
much
sir.
attached to Gilu, and I'm actually it's not easy for me to jump so easily.
I had to go to the end of the story quickly to be able to do that because I was almost teary eyed when Gillu died.
Okay, well, that was such a tragic ending. But nevertheless, I can see Muskan also commenting that please don't say Gillu died, and she is crying. She typed so many crying smileys. But nonetheless, ma'am, before we move to the next story, I would like to tell you. I mean, it was amazing story, and I never felt so close and so connected with a squirrel before, and you felt so much of life in Gilu, and I never knew. I mean, is it a true story, ma'am? Is it based on true incidents, or is it imaginary?
Mahadevi Verma was really fond of animals and she did have a lot of pets. So I would say maybe it's not probably based on Gillu, a real squirrel that she had, but probably one of her pets for sure.
Okay, okay, that was so unfortunate, and I mean, I was imagining it throughout. Why did you do this to me, ma'am? Why did you make me fall in love with Gillu? And chalo, anyways, so I hope everybody enjoyed. So let's move on to the next story, which is by Sudha Murthy, right, ma'am?
Right,
So the
right.
writer Sudha Murthy. So again, I would pin you on the screen so that yes,
So, thank you, sir. So, the next story that we have is Sudha Murthy's How I Taught My Grandmother to Read. Let's quickly get into the story. I've given enough background. So, when I was a little girl, now this is Sudha Murthy talking. When I was a little girl, I lived in North Karnataka with my grandparents, with my grandmother who was working all day in the kitchen, cooking and cleaning and looking after the family. And she happened to love that. She really, really cherished that. Now, in those days, the transport system was not very good. Uh, the morning paper would come in the afternoon. The weekly magazine would come a day late. So that's how that's what the transport system was like. All of us would wait eagerly for the bus that brought the newspaper and the weekly magazine to come in, and even the post. We would wait eagerly for that bus to come in. And at that time, Triveni was a very popular writer of Kannada literature. So she wrote in Kannada, and she was a very, very popular writer. And one of her novels called Kashi Yatre, which is about a journey to Kashi or Banaras, it appeared in serial form in a magazine that we subscribed, that we used to subscribe to. And her writing was very simple, which is why I really loved her writing, and which is why my grandmother loved the story that I would narrate to her too. Now, Kashi Yatre, the novel, it is the story of an old lady and her desire to go to Kashi. And so most of the Hindus believe that going to Kashi is like the ultimate punya, and it's one of the most coveted journeys in Hindu families or by Hindus. Now the same belief was held by this old lady too, and a similar belief was also held by my grandmother, which is why she could connect with this story so well, which is why she could connect with this story on such a deep level. Now my grandmother never went to school, and she couldn't read because she never went to school. Now, every Wednesday, the magazine would come and I would read the next episode to her. And she would forget all her work, she would forget everything that she had to take care of, and she would listen with such concentration. It was adorable. Now, later, she would repeat the entire text by heart. I just had to narrate it once, and she could repeat the entire text of that episode by heart. My grandmother had also never been to Kashi, so she could relate with the protagonist of the novel really well, like I already said. And which is why she was really, every Wednesday, she was so eager to know what's happening, what's going to happen in the story next. And later, when we would go to the temple in the courtyard. So one side of the courtyard the kids would play. I also went with my grandmother, and there were other kids I would play with. And I always noticed that on one end of the courtyard, she would sit with her friends, other old women from the village. She would sit there, and they would talk about their life. But my grandmother always ended up narrating the story of Kashi Yatre, of the episode that I had narrated to her the previous day with her friends, to her friends. And that is how her interactions with her friends were also designed. They were all based on the story of Kashi Yatre ever since we started reading it. Now, once I went to a nearby village for a cousin's wedding, and my grandmother wasn't accompanying me. I had gone there all by myself, and I was at this wedding, and there were my relatives were there, even my parents were there, and I was going to I had to stay there for 2 3 days, but I ended up spending an entire week in the village at the wedding. Now, after the wedding, when I came back home, I saw my grandmother crying as she welcomed me. I was very surprised because I had never seen this woman cry. She was such a strong woman. Even in the most difficult times, I had never seen her cry. And today, when I had returned, she was crying. I knew she loved me, but her love, even though her love was great, she really, really loved me, but she wouldn't cry out of love, is one thing I was convinced of. So I was a little surprised and I got very worried. I thought I did not know what had happened. So I asked her, Abba, is everything all right? Are you okay? So she just nodded her head and she did not say anything. And I was such a stupid kid, I didn't even understand and I forgot about it. And later that night, when I was sleeping on the terrace of my house, it was an open terrace, of course, and we used to sleep there. And I was sleeping on a cot there, and she came and she sat next to me in the middle of the night. And I woke up with a start because she was caressing my hair, and I woke up with a start, and I was really startled to see her sitting there by my bedside in the middle of the night because that had never happened. She did not have a tendency to disturb people in their sleep or disturb people in general. A very kind and a very gentle lady she was. So I looked at her and I looked at her very intently, and I could see that she wanted to say something. So I waited for her to say whatever she had to say, but she did not. She did not speak. So I asked her, Abba, what is wrong? Do you want to say something? You can talk to me. So then she went on with a story from her own life, and she told me. She said that when I was a young girl, I lost my mother, and there was nobody to look after me. There was nobody to guide me. I did not have a female presence in my life. And my father in those days used to be a very busy man. And he married again. He remarried for so he could have a wife as a companion and also somebody who could look after the house and the kids. And in those days, people never considered the education of women essential. So I was married off at a very young age, and I never went to school because nobody cared for my education. And then when I got married, I had kids. And I was very young when I had kids. I had kids and I got busy with them. And then I had grandchildren and I got very busy with feeding my grandchildren, looking after them, cooking for them. And that gave me an immense amount of happiness. But at the same time, I really regretted not going to school. I really regretted not getting an education. So I decided that my kids and my grandkids are going to go to school and are going to get the best of education. Now, when my grandmother was narrating the story to me in the middle of the night, I couldn't understand why she was telling me this. So I looked at her again and she looked very unhappy. And she was a very lively woman. She would always keep smiling. She was always happy. It was, she was so full of energy otherwise because she was always working in the kitchen, looking after the house, and that of course that she found a lot of happiness in that. So she was always smiling and she was a very lively person. But today when I looked at her, she was extremely unhappy. She was on the verge of tears, and that really disturbed me. So I asked her, Abba, what's the matter? And it was late in the night. I was really sleepy and she was telling me the story. So I asked her, Ava, what's the matter? Tell me what is wrong. So she said, I need your help. I said, tell me how I can help you. So then she went on to tell me that this Wednesday, when the magazine came and you weren't around, I opened it and I saw the pictures in the magazine. And I couldn't understand anything that was written. I kept rubbing my hand over the pages, but I couldn't understand anything. I really wanted to read the magazine, but I don't know how to read. And in that moment, I felt so dependent. In that moment, I felt so helpless. I waited for you to return and I thought that you would come back and read to me, but you didn't come back in time. I also thought that I would go to that village that you were in and I would have you read out this episode to me right there in that village because I was so curious to know what's going to happen next. I would have asked somebody around this village, but I was really embarrassed to ask somebody to read me a story. I couldn't read a story to myself. So the helplessness that I felt at that point is something I cannot describe to you. And we're so well off. But what is the use of all this money if I cannot be independent? So I have decided I am going to learn the Kannada alphabet tomorrow onward. And I'll work hard and I learn to read because I want to be independent. Now, she looked very determined. My Ava, my grandmother, she looked very, very determined. But I thought that I should, it's not a feasible thing to do because she was so old. She was 62 years old. She was so busy all day in the kitchen and looking after the house and cooking. So I laughed at her, but she merely smiled. And she was really, really determined to put in the hard work. And she said, there is no age bar for learning. And you wouldn't believe, Ava was a wonderful student. So we began the next day itself. I was teaching her the alphabet. I was teaching her how to read Kannada. And she was a wonderful student, a very bright student. She finished her homework in time, was always very enthusiastic to learn. She would read, repeat, write, and recite, and she devoted herself to learning how to read and write entirely, completely. And I was her only teacher, and she was my first student. So on Dashera, when Dashera arrived, I got her a copy of Kashi Yatre, the novel. It had been published in novel form by now. So I got her a copy of Kashi Yatre, and before I could give her the copy, before I could give her the book, she took me to the puja room and something very unexpected happened. She asked me to sit on the stool in the puja room and she touched my feet. And I was startled to begin with because I did not know how to react. In our tradition, elders do not touch the feet of their younger ones. It's either you either touch the feet of your teachers or of your elders or of God. um, you do not really touch the feet of your younger ones. And I did not know how to react at all. I did not know what was happening. This was absolutely unprecedented. So I asked her what she was doing, and yet I am emphasizing the fact that I did not know how to react because I really did not know how to react. So I just went on to ask her what she was doing and why she was doing that. So she said, I am touching your feet as my teacher and not as my granddaughter. And a teacher who has taught me so well, a teacher who has taught me to be independent, that so independent enough for me to be able to read a book at least. And in that moment, I gave her her gift, and she opened the wrapper, and when she held it in her hand, she could read the heading of the she could read Kashi Yatre written on the book, and that was one of the most beautiful moments of my life. In that moment, my student had passed with flying colors, and I cannot express how happy I was. So this was the story of Sudha Murthy, how she taught her grandmother to read, and I felt it was a very touching story, and which is why I chose this. And I'm very happy. I'm very happy about it.
Amazing, ma'am. This actually reminded me of my grandmother, and uh, I also tried doing this. I mean, although it was more of our initiative that
Right.
me and my sister and my other cousins wanted to teach our grand mother to study, but she was like, "Ke, हो गया है, अब जो होना है." अब कुछ नहीं होना मेरे को मेरे को नहीं पढ़ना. So but, I mean, I'm really amazed by that her grandmother's will to learn, and I mean that's amazing. That's why we say that uh, learning is, it doesn't have any age. It can start at any time.
Right.
You should be willing to do that. And
Right.
trust me, ma'am, I loved both of your stories. I was feeling so comfortable and cozy when you were telling the story. Actually, you could
Thank you,
have seen
sir.
I pulled my blanket and I was listening to it, and I was like, wow. It was like I'm watching some, Netflix movie. So I was
Right, right.
enjoying it so much. And
Thank you,
I mean, it
sir.
was great. What about people who are watching? Yeah, you meant you want
Yes,
to ask
one
something?
thing, yes, yes. I wanted to say something about Sudha Murthy here, that I really admire her as a person.
Okay,
And now, when, like, after narrating this story, I realized maybe she gets this passion for learning from her grandmother.
maybe.
So
Right.
yeah, it sort of runs in the
Runs in
family.
the blood, yeah, in the family. So, how about our students? How did you find it? Please comment and let us know, because Deeksha ma'am has worked very hard to prepare these stories. And we also request to all the students who are watching this, please share with others, because we work tirelessly to bring this one story nama to you, and we have to speak to many people, ask for people who are actually who care about Indian writers, Indian stories, Indian characters. We are keeping this tradition alive so that all the students can hear these amazing stories. So please share it with others, tell your friends so that they can come and watch, because the numbers really motivate us, and I'm sure as an audience we enjoy telling it to more and more people. So I mean, it's a great platform, and I think it should grow. That's what I think. Apart from that, ma'am, let me read out few comments. What people are saying. Muskan is saying amazing. Sanchit is saying both the stories were so heart touching. Thank you so much for keeping this session. You're such a great narrator. Okay,
Thank you.
amazing.
Thank you, Sanchit.
Ashtam sir is saying amazing. Then Muskan is saying adult literacy is a very nice step for adults who really want to learn. Indeed, indeed. So yes, ma'am. Would you like to, I mean, acknowledge these comments?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for such warm comments. I'm really touched. And I'm waiting actually to go and look at them myself. So, yeah, very excited about that too.
Amazing, amazing. So, for all the students who are still with us, we would like to inform you that we come live on our YouTube channel every Sunday at 7 p.m. with different stories, different tellers, and yes, they are mostly Indian stories, and they are as amazing as the story was today. And, ma'am, thank you so much for sparing your time. And I mean, we personally know how busy you are these days, so thank you so much for taking out time for this initiative, and
Thank
we
you,
loved
sir.
it, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. I also had a wonderful time. And like you can see, I'm not tired at all.
Yes, ma'am.
So, it's been a very, very great evening.
Amazing, ma'am, amazing. That's the best part. So thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much to all the viewers for joining. Not viewers, I would say we feel like a family now. So thanks to all the family members who joined us today. And with that, I would like to end the session. And yes, god bless you, and keep learning, keep growing.